This is ODAT Chat, your instant connection to recovery and community, one day at a time. This podcast may contain strong language, sexual content, and spiritual truth. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, hey friend, welcome to another episode of the ODAT Chat podcast. In case you're new here, my name is Arlena and I'll be your host. This is a podcast where my guests share their stories of alcoholism and addiction and their journey to recovery. By the way, I love hearing from you all when I get emails or messages on the ODAT Chat Facebook group. It absolutely makes my day. And you know what I'd really love to hear about? I want to know, what is the one challenge you have been struggling with these days and what is helping you get through it sober? If you want to email me, I'll share your thoughts on the podcast. And let me just give you a for instance here. So I personally have a ton of transition going on in my life. I'm in the process of moving out of state. And it's really been hard for me not to future trip. There's just so many moving parts. It's hard for me not to obsess about it at times. It kind of keeps me up at night. But the one thing that's helped me is step 11. So practicing prayer and meditation. Also, when I catch myself doing it, I just repeat 3 times silently to myself, be here right here, right now, and do the next right thing. Because practically speaking, all there is now. And anything else is just a fantasy. And I don't want to waste my life tripping on things that aren't actually even happening. So, because that would be crazy, right? So that's the kind of thing I want to hear. Tell me about your tips or strategies that are helping you get through stressful life situations, and I'll share them on future episodes. So you can email me with that or send me any other questions or comments to arlena@odatchat.com. My first name is spelled Arlina and ODAT is ODAAT. One day at a time. All right, so today I have the pleasure and really the honor of sharing a conversation I had with Laura Cathcart Robbins, who is a fabulous writer and now a podcaster of the newly minted podcast, The Only One in the Room. And man, she is one of those special people who just seems to have a knack for writing viral articles on publications like The Huffington Post. That's right, I said it, The Huffington Post. She's just doing absolutely amazing work. But just one more thing before we dive in, I wanted to share that I'm looking for people who are willing to go through the Holding Safe Space breakthrough process for the podcast. You can find details about this class at soberlifeschool.com. So the idea is that you get to go through the process for free and be a guest on the podcast, anonymously, of course, so that you can benefit from the experience, but also share your experience, strength, and hope. So if you're interested in participating, hopefully all that made sense. Again, email me at arlena@odatchat.com. Okay, so back to Laura. One of the reasons I'm super excited to share this conversation is because she just, like I said, launched her podcast, The Only One in the Room, produced by Lipstick and Vinyl's Christina Barcy and Allison Marino, which just launched last Tuesday. The podcast was born out of this viral article that was published on the Huffington Post about her experience of being the only Black woman in the room at a famed writer's retreat. I think she told me that there was like 600 people there. So that's a lot of people to be the only one. She was overwhelmed with comments from people of all races, ethnicities, if I could say that right, and nationalities who have also felt othered. And isn't that a cool word, othered? So I totally get it. Her podcast will feature guests who share their stories of feeling othered as well. So in this episode, we dig into her story. So what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So with that, please enjoy this conversation with the lovely and super talented Laura Cathcart Robbins.
I will take it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Laura, thank you so much for joining me on the ODAT Chat podcast.
I'm happy to be here.
Yay! So it's kind of interesting. We met through my friend who reached out to me, and she was like, "Oh my God, this woman is amazing. You must have her on your podcast." And I was like, oh, I love referrals like that. So I reached out to you and you were super down. So here we are.
Yeah. And I think that she connected us. I had a piece run in the Huffington Post a couple weeks ago about, the title was, "I was a mom who drank and used, and here's what it's like," or something like that. It was their title, actually, not mine, but, that article. So thank you. And it went viral. And every time I write about my recovery and it goes viral, I meet more people in recovery on social media, which is a really bonus to being sober in this age, is that's another way to connect with people. 15 years ago, I would have had to go from city to city, and maybe they would have read the article and maybe we could meet in a meeting. But now it's like seconds after they read it, they've connected with me in Idaho and, Massachusetts and Germany and wherever. It's awesome.
It's great being there's so many advantages to being so connected, right? And the fact that you're such a prolific writer and you seem to strike the vein. So I think a person, well, I don't mean to psychoanalyze you or anything, but somebody who is really authentic and in touch with their feelings and writing from such a pure place, that's what I think you're speaking the language of the heart, which just cuts right through the bullshit and really allows people to feel connected. That's a gift, Laura. So good job.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. And I think, what you and I were talking about earlier, about solution. And, part of it is that I don't have any shame about the things that I'm writing about anymore, whereas I wouldn't have been able to write any of those pieces at 1 or 2 years sober. But the work that I've done has allowed me to look at it through the lens of, this might be able to help somebody. Even if it can't, I'm happy to tell this story. Now,
let me ask you something. When you're writing, can you tell that it's going to be viral?
No, I can only hope that it's going to be viral. But no, I can't tell. I don't know who's going to pick it up. And, the Huffington Post, they publish a few of my pieces, and they're such a large platform that it's likely, if it's something scintillating, that it's gonna go wide. If it's on the Huffington Post platform. Other pieces that I published, one of them it's made its way to viral. That wasn't on as large of a platform, but it's hard to tell. So I just write it and put it out there and see what happens.
What was the other? Of course, I'm going to leave links to all of these articles in the show notes. But what was the other one?
The temper, I think. Did you and I talk about the temper?
You told me about the publication, but I don't think I'm familiar with which. We talked about several of your pieces, but I'm not sure which went with which.
Yeah, the temper is an online recovery publication, and it's edited and founded by women who are both abstinent and in 12-step recovery and sober. The way that they've chosen to get sober. So it's not all 12-step recovery. It's a really nice mixture of people and their stories. And they published a story of mine called, I think the title was something about how I hated Alcoholics Anonymous, but I got sober anyway. And because I did, when I first came in, I was so resistant. And I don't think hate was in the title, but it was something to the effect of, I got sober in spite of how I felt about Alcoholics Anonymous.
That's amazing. It's so funny because people are so triggered by anything that's anti-AA that I bet all the passionate fanatics were like, what is she going to say about this?
Well, a lot of the comments afterwards were they were reading it ready to type me like a hate mail. But once they read it, they realized that it's really an ode to AA. And it's an AA love story because I found my way. And a lot of my writing is about race. The Temper really wanted me to write my authentic story about coming in, even though not everybody that publishes, that writes for their magazine is sober through AA. They really wanted my experience in AA because it was a good one.
Listen, so you mentioned, sorry to interrupt. You mentioned race, and this is a podcast, so people can't see you.
Right.
So what is your ethnic background?
So I'm Black. Both my parents are Black. My 23andMe says that I am 49% Sub-Saharan African, and the rest is a mixture of Norwegian, English, and Sephardic Jew and Neanderthal. Which I think is really funny.
We all kind of Neanderthal.
Yeah, a little bit, but yeah, very, very small percentage Neanderthal. So, but both my parents were Black.
American?
We were no Native American. I was actually really disappointed by that. So,
were you expecting Native American to be in there?
I both sides of my mother's side, my father's side, they have talked about their Native American heritage. There's stories about how this woman from the Seminole tribe got together with this slave and they made these babies, and I got nothing. So I don't know if the story's not true or if it just didn't trickle down to me, but I'm basically just a mixture of European and African.
Okay. Well, you are beautiful. So people put pictures of you on the website.
Thank you.
Yes, and we'll definitely talk about race. I'm really interested about that, and you'll forgive my ignorance or whatever as we go along, I hope, because I'm going to ask you.
Of course.
I'll just ask you whatever.
This is a time to ask questions, right?
Yeah.
And I am a safe place for that. So thank you for saying that. But yes, of course.
Yeah. I'm mixed too, but I'm half Mexican and half German and Irish and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, I can see that.
Oh, can you? Oh, thank you.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice mixture.
Thanks. Okay, but you know what? Maybe we should backtrack a little bit because so we talked a little bit that you're a writer and you're a podcaster, and we're gonna get into the whole podcasting thing because I wanna talk about that and make sure that we're this is going to be published for your podcast launch week. I'm sure you're going to be
very exciting.
So we'll definitely get this out before then.
Thank you.
Is writing what you do professionally?
Yes, that's an interesting question. I get paid for writing, but I don't make a living at it because I don't make enough to do it. So I don't do anything else to make money at this point. Okay. But I do. So I say that I'm a writer. That's my
a writer and a podcaster. That's cool.
Yes.
Okay. And so let's start at the beginning. Tell me a little bit about where you grew up and what you were like as a little girl.
I grew up in several places. I was born in Chicago. I spent 6 months in Denmark when I was 3.5 with my parents got divorced and decided that was a freer society than Chicago. So my mother and I moved there. My father and I were supporting both of us. He did for a really long time. And it was the cost of living was too high there. It was also extremely homogenous, and I don't think they took that into account. So we were the only people who looked like us for miles around. And that was quite a shock for my mom. So to Cambridge, Mass is where we moved when I was 4 turning 5. And I was in Cambridge until I was 12, and then Berkeley, California until I was about 20, Fort Lauderdale, and then for a few years, Florida. And then I moved to LA in 1988, and I've been here ever since.
LA in 88. So this is all, okay. So you've lived in lots of different places. Do you remember, you don't remember Denmark at all, do you? At 3.5?
I do, actually.
Really?
I don't know. I think I do. There are pictures that have I formed memories around.
Sure.
But in my mind, I have memories of going to the movies there. I remember going to someone's home. I remember the way it smelled. I remember getting presented with a pair of clogs. And
they really wear clogs in Denmark?
Yeah. And it should be Holland, right? But this was Denmark. And I remember things like that, just bits and pieces, but not the entire experience.
So if you were the only child of color, did you have experiences where other kids were surprised to see you? Or
I don't remember that.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't remember that. My mother does. My mother remembers everybody being surprised to see us. and then having lots of questions, and then finding out we were American, and like that was mind blowing. Like, what are you doing here?
Why are you here? Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just you and Mom when you were 12 years old in Cambridge?
It was not. It was my mother remarried a man who was my stepfather. As soon as we got to Cambridge, they got together.
Okay.
So, and he was a big setup for my alcoholism. He was my nemesis. We never got along. Nothing I did was ever good enough for him. The way I did it was never good enough for him. Later on, my mother revealed to me that she believes that he hated me from the beginning.
Why?
I thought about that. And during my step work, I had a revelation that this thing happened when my parents split up, and I cried so hard that my mother couldn't leave. We actually left for Copenhagen twice, and she had to turn around in Montreal the first time and come back because I was making myself sick crying. Didn't want to leave my dad. And I think that I carried that with me into this new relationship where I would have nothing to do with anybody who wasn't my father.
Yeah.
And he was 24 years old at the time. I mean, to me, he was a man, but he was really kind of a kid.
Yeah.
And I think I was this formidable, like, little 5-year-old girl who just would have none of him. That doesn't excuse, in my mind, the behavior that happened. However, I think it explains maybe some of it, of the setup, and how he handled that setup, to me, is inexcusable. So because I was a child.
Yeah, for sure. So you grew up with constant criticism and
emotional abuse.
Abuse. And your mother put you in that situation. So were you resentful towards Mom?
I probably, as I was growing up, but I wasn't really connected with it then. It felt like we were both trying to survive him. She was abused as well. And it was kind of a typical abusive relationship where it would get better and then she would stay. And there were so many things that made it more comfortable to stay than to go out and fend for herself and leave. So I felt like we were comrades in that in many ways when I was growing up. And then later on, I was resentful. I didn't really connect with the resentment until I got sober and I started doing my full step. Yeah. So I didn't feel like that growing up. I didn't feel like, Mom, you let me down.
Okay. And where was Dad all this time?
So Dad went to, you see, I started smiling when I talk about Dad.
I know.
He went to med school in Nashville, and he's an AIDS doctor. He lives in Florida. Hence an AIDS doctor, yeah.
Oh, he is. Bless his heart.
Yeah, HIV and AIDS. I think he might object to my saying he's an AIDS doctor. He's an HIV doctor.
An HIV, okay. That's amazing. Yeah. He went to med school, and that's awesome.
And then moved to Florida. He's also he'll be 35 years sober this November.
35 years sober?
Recovery. Yeah.
35 years sober. That's amazing. Okay, so he got sober and then went to med school.
No, he went to med school way before that. So I was a little kid. I'm 54. He got sober when I was around 17, 18. So he went to med school and then
that loaded. That's amazing.
And kind of like me, I don't think he was an active alcoholism then. I don't think that it really kicked in until later. I can actually tell you when it kicked in because I lost contact with him. And
how old were you? How old were you when he fell off?
I was around. It's a little muddled for me, but I was around 16.
Oh man, that's the worst time.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. I didn't live with him, so I wasn't. It was only visits, and he usually got together for the visits, But then there was a point where he couldn't get it together for the visits, and I knew something was really wrong. And then the next thing I know, he had checked himself into treatment, and I didn't understand what that was or why. I didn't know anything about alcoholism.
Yeah. Why would you?
Yeah. And then he was, he was my dad again after that.
That's awesome. That's a happy story.
Yes.
Okay. So tell me this though. So when did you how old were you when you first started using, like drinking or using?
I was 16 when my friends were all drinking beer, and I hated it. So I would pretend to take sips of it and ditch it. But that was
and then act a little loopy.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be a part of so badly.
I understand.
I just wanted to be like in with the crowd, but I could not drink that swill they were drinking, and I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
Later on, I was able to drink a little bit more, but I never liked it. I never liked the taste of alcohol. But I did try freebasing, which, right? I went straight from not liking my sips of beer to freebasing when I was 18 or 19.
Wow.
I tried it for the first time, and freebasing was created in the Bay Area, which
is that
you may
right?
or may not know. Yeah, it was by a UC Berkeley scientist who was, just not trying to get high, but trying to figure out different ways to prepare cocaine to maybe get medical uses out of it, et cetera, et cetera. Baking soda and boiling water and cocaine made this rock formation, and as it turns out, it's very smokable. It later became crack. I didn't do it anymore by the time it was crack, but when it was freebasing, I tried it, and everything clicked for me.
Wow.
I loved it.
Tell me how you tried it for the first time.
It was a different group of people. These were, so I have friends in Oakland and friends in Berkeley, and these were like my Oakland friends. I'm not that far from Oaktown. I don't know what Oaktown people are like. They were, it was a little bit more street, a little bit more hood. Not saying that Oakland is, but my friends there were.
Okay.
And they had this, and they seemed fine. Like they partied with it. It wasn't like how it's depicted in movies where people are shut up and they haven't, bathed, and they're, prostituting themselves for it. It was totally a party scene with it. Okay. So we would party with it on the weekends. But
recreational freebasing.
But it's turned out that, I did this for about the span of a year.
Okay.
And at the end of that year, they were all done before I was on the weekends. Like I would be clearly the last one up and the last one still ready to go. And it was starting to show.
They're like, Laura, it's 11 o'clock on a Sunday. What are you doing?
People had school. Like I had school. I was in community college, and so I had school too. And so it was just like, it just wasn't cool anymore. So it wasn't like I just decided to stop, but it ended up that I just stopped hanging out with that crowd for a while. I moved to Florida a few months later, and to live with my dad, who was now in recovery. Okay. And so that part of my life it just wasn't a part of my life anymore. it also, I guess it's a twist of irony, but in my mind, I thought, well, I can't be an alcoholic because I really love this. Clearly, I was dependent on it, but I just put it down. So that means that I'm free from this thing. I don't have to worry about being an addict or an alcoholic because this is how this went in my life.
Because you put it down.
And that gave me this false sense of kind of invincibility going forward.
Did you feel like you had control still?
Over freebasing?
Yeah.
Or over
any of it?
Over other substances? Yeah. Okay. I was very tempted to leave it.
Yeah.
With other substances were in play, I was the first person going home. I did not want to stay out and go get another drink or go get a package of cocaine that people were snorting, and I never smoked weed. I hated weed. So I was never that person who pursued those things. But in my 20s, I was never that person. I should say later on.
Listen, we all evolve. We all evolve.
Definitely that person. But I was not as progressed then.
Got it.
I was unprogressed in my 20s. So I was able to kind of, build a life. And I had I came out here and I worked for a commercial director, and then I ended up like kind of fast forwarding, opening a public relations firm that was really successful. And I helmed it. I had a staff, and I had most of the labels and studios on retainer. And I would do all their urban PR. And I'm putting air quotes around that you guys can't see while you're listening. But that means that's code for Black. So any Black movie, any Black TV show, anything in the hip hop or R&B vein, they threw it to me to do the publicity for. And I was the only, I think I was the only Black publicist in Los Angeles at that time.
Wow.
Doing entertainment PR specifically. There were other Black publicists, but they were doing other things. I was doing entertainment PR. Mm-hmm. There were lots in New York, but there weren't any here for a while. So I took all that money.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Very entrepreneurial.
Very entrepreneurial. And it was around that time that I met my husband. And around that same time, actually, I met him right before I opened the PR firm. And when he and I got married, I was 31 and I shuttered the PR firm, and because I got pregnant with Miles, my 21-year-old. And I decided, well, actually my ex-husband and I, my now ex-husband and I decided then that I wanted to be home with our son. And I didn't know for how long, but I just wanted to be home with him. And then my other son was born the following year. So that was it. I didn't go back out and work again while I was raising them. And that is when my alcoholism fired up.
When they were little?
When they were little.
Yeah. It's hard. And, it's hard being a stay-at-home mom for many reasons. Yeah. I would imagine being an entrepreneurial, creative, I dare say hard-charging person that, being a mom is real. It's like you do it, like I did it too. I was a stay-at-home mom for a few years, and I actually ran a daycare out of my house, but it was tough to go from hitting all 8 cylinders to barely getting out of second gear. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it was endlessly boring. I mean, listen,
it is.
Yes. Yeah. It was hard to shift gears that hard. So did you find yourself being lonely or uninspired or?
No, first of all, I was someone who didn't really want kids. I did not want them. I just never even thought about that being an inevitable, or marriage. I wasn't someone who dreamed of getting married or a wedding. I never even thought about a wedding dress or any of that stuff. And so when I got married, that kind of blindsided me. And then, then I got pregnant and I was kind of like, okay, I did not like being pregnant at all. I just thought, this is weird. I didn't like having another person in me. The arms and legs poking out, like that freaked me out.
Did it really? I love that part.
It was a really pregnancy. I
Was
didn't,
it?
I gained 24 pounds and 22 pounds respectively.
Congratulations.
Well, I mean, I wasn't trying. It was just how it was, and really easy births, like snaps, like no pain, 2 pushes, both of them out.
Amazing.
But I still didn't like it. I didn't enjoy the feeling of being pregnant. I didn't enjoy any of that process. However, I was stunned by my maternal instinct. Like it slayed me. I was completely unprepared to fall that hard, that much in love.
I know.
And I became completely enmeshed with both of my kids. Like they were my world. I didn't miss working. I just wanted to be around them 24/7. But so I had this crazy maternal instinct that was never in play before. And what I also discovered later was that I was also in postpartum depression, which worsened after the birth of my second son.
That's not right.
But I didn't know that I was in postpartum because it didn't present itself the way that I had heard other people, like where they were depressed or moody or lack of connection with their child. I didn't experience that. What I had was anxiety and sleeplessness and just feeling like a lack of connection to the outside world, not to my kids though.
Okay.
So
like to your husband, or was it just like no friends and like no interest in friends, that kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, and it didn't happen like a snap like that. Mm-hmm. Everything else just kind of faded away. Mm. So everything else was an intrusion eventually.
Yeah.
From the outside, I was very engaged in my life. Nobody knew that I was feeling this way, including my husband. He might have known something, but he probably figured it was just, she just had 2 babies, blah, 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 like
early motherhood. Yeah,
but it wasn't just that.
You mentioned sleeplessness, and that's every mom.
Yeah, but it wasn't just that I couldn't sleep because they weren't sleeping. It's I couldn't sleep even when they were. Like I could never sleep after I had them. And I knew that was unusual because because all my friends were on the same track that I was. So all my friends who were single with me were now married and having babies, and their lives looked much different than mine did. Okay. And the way that they talked about it was much different than my experience. And I probably lied and matched their experience while we were talking about it again, just to be part of, like I did with those beers.
Like the chameleon thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I didn't have the same experience as them. And the other thing that happened was I think my alcoholism woke up then and really made friends with my postpartum depression. And it's like, hey, you can't sleep? I know exactly what'll be good for that.
Oh, yeah.
You're anxious? Let's go to the doctor and get something that'll be helpful for that.
Yeah.
And like, and bonus, you can just shut the world out and stay with your kids. You don't have to deal with anybody. We can just sleep and relax and and hang out with them. And it's not what I did because, I was room parent. I was field trip mom. I was parent association president. I joined the board, and I still sit on that board, which is funny.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so from the outside, it looked like I was, like I said, like I was engaging, but internally I was about as shut down as I could be. And I had doctors at that point, different ones. I lied to all of them.
Why?
That prescribed me different pills. Well, I lied to them so that they would give me more pills.
Oh.
So if I told my OBGYN that my general practitioner was giving me the same pills, he wouldn't have done it.
Got it.
So I went in and exhibited symptoms that I knew would get me what I needed.
What kind of pills?
Mainly Ambien.
Oh, okay.
The sleeping pill.
Yeah.
I went to treatment A spoiler. I went to treatment in July of 2008 for Ambien.
For Ambien, okay.
That's
more Ambien for Laura.
So
okay.
Yeah, right.
How you feeling now?
Ambien and alcohol. That's what I. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. John Mayer has a song about that, red wine and Ambien.
Yeah. I didn't know that, but that's funny.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah. And I got sober before that, and I was like, "Damn it, that sounds amazing."
I thought it was. I loved it.
So when your kids were little and you're having the anxiety and the depression, then you start taking Ambien and alcohol. That's how long were you able to do that? Live that way?
Like in full-blown addiction, about a year and a half.
Okay.
But ramping up to that, 6 to 8 years.
Okay. So 6 to 8 years of ramping up. So was it like the typical thing that you hear people talk about? It's like fun with problems and then just problems?
Yes, in a way. It was never fun for me. I strictly did it so that I could show up for my family. Oh. It was never social. No one ever saw it. In my mind, I'm like, this is what I need in order to be there for my kids. I need to get sleep. I need to be less anxious. I need to get normalized so that I can show up for my family. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like party time, not like the freebasing was back in the day. That was fun. This was work for me. This was part of what I needed to do. Yeah.
So you realize it sounds like survival mode. It's like emotion management type thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Totally.
So when did you needed to get help?
I decided I needed to get help. Well, in February of 2008, I had just driven my younger son, to a basketball tournament. It was packed because it was like one of the playoff games to the championship. And usually there's lots of space, but all the bleachers were taken. And they were little. It wasn't like for school. It was a travel ball. Actually, it was rec ball. It was a rec center. And sometime about halfway through that, I woke up in an ambulance because I'd had a grand mal seizure. And it was, so I had nothing. I used to say that I had tried to stop, but that's not true. I had just run out of everything about a week and a half before. I had run out of pills. I didn't have any alcohol to wash it down with, so I just hadn't had anything for almost 2 weeks. And apparently, when you've been abusing Ambien the way that I was, and you stop suddenly, your brain doesn't like that. It short circuits it. So I had no idea. It was as far from my knowledge as anything could have been. So when I woke up in the ambulance, I had no idea what had happened. I had another grand mal seizure in the ER while I was waiting for them to see me.
Oh my goodness, too.
I don't remember the seizures. I just remember waking up or coming to. Mm-hmm. And you would think, or one would think that would be what got me into treatment, but it wasn't. What ended up getting me into treatment, after those seizures, I decided to file for divorce because I thought that I had to drink and drug so much because my marriage was unhappy. And so divorce seemed to be the solution to me in my warped mind. Like, this will get me better and I won't have to drink and drug like this. And then my doctors, when they realized that I had withdrawal seizures, that's what they call them, they overrode my prescription so that I never ran out again. So I got an unlimited supply of Ambien. And I know, that's crazy.
That's all insanity.
It's total insanity. And it was a conferring of doctors. Like they all met and they decided that this would be the best.
As a group? Oh my gosh.
And so
are these guys that, or women, whatever, men and women, I don't know, had they been seeing you over an extended period of time, or were these doctors that were new to you?
Doctors in the hospital.
You know, so it just makes me so mad that it seems like the medical community is so uneducated about how to treat addiction. It's like they're the biggest dope dealers. God forbid. I know people are going to be so mad at me for saying that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's pretty well documented, actually.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the opioid crisis, these pills are being overprescribed at every level. Yeah. And no one's really taking accountability for it.
I think the CDC reported that there were 70,000 deaths in, I think, 2017. And if you want to equate it to something, there were 50,000 deaths in Vietnam. So it's like 20,000, over the span of the Vietnam War, 50,000, but we lost 70,000 to the opioid crisis. It's just total insanity. Okay, so all these doctors decide that the best way to treat your Ambien addiction is to give you an unlimited supply. So that's awesome.
Right. Yes. And that is what took me down. I was literally in my house for like 4 months with all the Ambien I could take.
Wow.
And, I didn't black out, which is really interesting, but I browned out a lot. I would just be like faded, like I would be faded and know kind of what was going on, and slurring and slipping and and I would do my best to try and wait until my kids were asleep before I took it. But,
okay, I was just about to ask.
So that was in February. Yeah. And
how old were
in June? My kids then.
Yeah, how old were Mild and
7 and 9.
Okay. And
7 and 9, yeah. So by June, I was taking it all the time. Not enough to knock me out all the time, but because I was so addicted to it, I had to have some of it in my system all the time, or else I'd be in withdrawal.
Wow.
And July 4th was my bottom. And it was just like the seizure should have been my bottom. But July 4th, I couldn't take my kids to the fireworks because I could feel withdrawal setting in. And I knew it was going to get really bad. So I sent them off with somebody else. And I missed it. And it really fucked me up that I couldn't be there for them. So I started looking for places to go check myself in.
Wow.
And I looked for places for 9 days. And then finally found one that told me I could have a private room, which is what I wanted.
Listen, we all have standards.
Yes. Lied, though. I didn't have a private room. Thank God they lied, because otherwise I wouldn't have gone and gotten sober. Mm-hmm. So that's how I came in.
So, so was that like you went to a treatment center? Was it like a rehab, like a 3-day rehab?
I went to the Meadows in Wickenburg, Arizona.
Okay. And I think when we chatted earlier, you told me something really significant, that you were in the divorce proceedings and your attorney advised you against it.
She did. So I filed for divorce in February. And so we were in the middle of it, that summer. We were in the middle of my divorce. It was looking good. It was looking really good for me. Yeah, and then I came in. She had these beautiful offices. She still has them, I think, in Century City, which is just this kind of like high-toned area of Los Angeles. Lots of business, like, skyscrapers, but lots of really nice businesses, lots of nice offices, a lot of attorneys, advertising, etc. And her offices were there, and I walked up and I explained to her that I could not go to treatment for any longer, because we had talked about it before. And I said, I think I'm going to have to check myself in. And she just, wait till we're done, until we have a result. And then go, get your rest. I'm putting air quotes around that too. Mm-hmm. Not really wanting to talk about the fact that there was an addiction in play. And I came into her, I was like, I can't wait. I got to go. Because what I found out later was that, I was dying. I really was. Every night that I took as much Ambien as I took and washed it down with vodka, I was risking not waking up. And, it was amazing that my organs were still functioning and that I hadn't done any damage to myself, but I didn't know that then. I didn't know if I had done any damage to myself. Mm-hmm. I had those seizures, which apparently hadn't done any permanent damage, which was, I was really grateful for. But I knew I couldn't do it anymore. Mm-hmm. I couldn't stop. And I couldn't wait either. So, she argued with me and asked me if I would sign something that said I was insane, basically. And that I was waiving her advice, which made me insane. And I refused to sign it because that was idiotic.
Because that would have been insane.
Yeah. And I went, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And then we got divorced. Yeah.
And then you got divorced. So it was a 30-day inpatient type thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow, that's so brave, Laura. Oh my gosh. I mean, you must have been so desperate to be willing to do that. I mean, you had everything at stake, but what was it that made you just be like, I have to do this? Was it like that little voice inside, or?
I mean, I really think it was as simple as I just realized that I would lose my kids one way or the other, or they would lose me.
They were going to lose me.
And I was very, like I know now, very codependent with them. I still, at the end, I look like a great mother because I was always with them. I put them to bed every night. Mm-hmm. I went to every appointment with them. I was, like I said, the room mom at school. I could not imagine my life without them. And I had drank and used in order to show up for them. So I thought, but now it was getting in the way. And I didn't want to lose them. Yeah. And I didn't want them to.
Yeah. No, that's so scary. Okay. So this is like my favorite part of recovery, right? Because you get the gift of desperation, you go to rehab, and that's when the magic starts happening. It feels like your life is falling apart, but really it's falling together, right? So tell me what your first 30 days in rehab were like.
It was terrible. I hated it. I felt
everybody hates it.
Well, so here's the thing. I'm in the other room is my boyfriend Scott, who I met the hour I checked in.
Did you really? 10 years ago? Oh my God.
Almost 11. It'll be 11 in July. And
really? Okay.
So I checked in. I was still high. Like I had taken as much Ambien and probably drank whatever I could before I got there. And he checked in an hour later. We were in orientation together. And I freaked out in orientation and ran to the office to check out. Like I was leaving. I was like, this is a huge fucking mistake. I can't do this. He followed me.
I'm out
of orientation and basically talked me off the ledge.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he's just as sober as you are. And he had the wherewithal to know what to say to you to make you.
He didn't know why. He doesn't know why he followed me out. It was just serendipitous. I think it was one of those things. And we weren't like a rehab hookup or anything like that. He was just, when my kids came to see me in treatment, I fell apart again. I was about to leave. I was like, I can't. It was halfway through. And I was like, I can't do another 15 days here without them. And I was sobbing, waiting to be seen in the office. And he came and he just like hugged me and let me cry. And he told me about his daughters. He has 2 daughters that he had left in order to come and get well. And that's how he phrased it. I came here to get well. And some of that sank in and I stayed. I think I was either crying or hating it the whole time I was there. I don't remember any magic happening in treatment. The only magic I remember is Scott.
That's so
He was magic for
sweet.
me.
Yeah, listen.
And he lived in Utah. He went back to Utah after treatment. And I came back to Los Angeles and finished getting divorced. Started meetings, hated meetings.
Why did you hate meetings? You were going to meetings in LA?
I hated all the meetings I went to anywhere. And I only had gone to meetings in LA and Wickenburg, Arizona, but I just thought these people were joiners. They were happy. They loved this. I hated it. I didn't want to not be high anymore. I just didn't want to be a slave to it.
All right. Yeah.
And I really thought that I was just going to get the heat off of me and then be able to use it like a normal person again, drink and use like a normal person, whatever that looks like. So
what do you mean? What do you mean get the heat off you? Because it didn't really sound, I didn't really hear anything in what you shared that it was like you were in trouble or anything. It sounded like you were high functioning.
I was, except for my ex-husband.
Oh, he didn't like it.
He didn't like it. And he was ringside, for the bottom. So if he wasn't satisfied, my thought was that if he didn't think that I was putting my all into this, he would not allow me to be a co-parent, or he would fight me on that. Mm-hmm. He never said that, but that was my thinking.
Okay. So he had a problem with your drinking and Ambien use?
I'm sure he did, but he wasn't very vocal about it.
He didn't try to control you with it, or like get mad at you?
Really. I mean, there was a point at the end where he found out like that I had been refilling the bar in our house while he was out, and stuff like in hiding, like the number of pills I was taking, and he's like, you need to get help, and I was just like, I know I will, I'll definitely do something. Mm-hmm. But the decision for me to go into treatment was my decision. Okay. I had a bottom of my own, but he and I were not, we hadn't been connected romantically for a long time at that point, because of the way I had to sequester myself off in order to be as shut down as I was.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure, honestly, what he thought at that point. But like I said, he wasn't very vocal about it.
Got it. Okay.
But I did have the idea that he would be if I continued. So that was the heat I wanted to get off of me.
Got it. Okay. So you start going to meetings that you hate, but in rehab, did they have you do like the 12 steps or start attending meetings?
Yeah, we went through 1 through 3, I think.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember it though.
So I actually didn't ask you, but did you have a relationship or a concept of God when you were growing up?
No. Yes and no. No religion.
Okay.
No religion in my family.
Uh-huh.
And I was really bookish. I read every book, probably what would be called young adult books now. And just novels by women, any time there was talk of a higher power, I would take that as my higher power, until the next book. And then whatever that was, that would be my higher power until the next book. And I kind of went like that, but I never had one of my own. Okay. So it didn't really come up for me.
So was it weird for you when you got to AA and there was all this talk about God?
Yes, that's another reason I hated it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to talk about God like that. That sounded terrible. Like, I don't know.
So
it's
funny.
like, that's, to sit in a group of people who are happy about being sober and talk about God was like the last thing I wanted to do.
That sounds horrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, I could see how that would be weird. And there is a lot of talk about God and a higher power. And I've heard it said that if you have a problem with God, chances are you have a problem with somebody else's God because someone is defining it. Did you have an opportunity? Yeah. So when you go to rehab and you have an opportunity to define it for yourself, do you remember what it was, what you were kind of hoping that would be?
I don't remember much from treatment, honestly.
Yeah, you're still coming out of it.
There because I was so sick. Yeah. So they still gave me drugs for the first 11 days. That's actually why my sobriety date is August, even though I checked in July. Oh. My sobriety date is August 14th because I know I was sober then. I don't know where in there I was sober.
Okay.
And
okay, so August 14th
is the day they walked in, but I can't.
August 14th, 2009?
2008.
2008. Okay. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, so walk me through your journey with a higher power. So what was it? How has it evolved from the first day to now?
So, well, it's evolved tremendously. And I'll tell you, you know what, I really enjoy that the word atheist just means a theist, where like a theist is someone who believes in a Judeo-Christian deity, and an atheist is someone who doesn't. So I am not an atheist in the way that most people think of the word, where I don't believe but I don't believe in a deity. I do believe in the divine, and I believe in divine energy, and I believe that there is I don't know if I don't want to say the wrong word here, but
no, there's no wrong word.
Yeah, well, I mean, but I don't want to put the wrong word to this. So what I believe is evolving continually, but right now, so when I was 11 months sober, I hated everything about AA, but I came in, I went to 3 meetings a day, I got a sponsor, I got the big book, I started working the steps with her, I did everything she told me. And I don't know why I did that. There was no rhyme or reason for it. Nobody was watching. I didn't have to report back to anybody. I just did it because I did it. Mm-hmm. I'm really grateful that I did, because it habituated, you know, it created this this inertia for me that later became my momentum. And so my sponsor, who I got, who's passed away now, but she told me at 11 months sober at 9 months sober that she was worried about me, because I just told her I wasn't going to do the 11th step. I was like, I don't believe in that. I'm definitely not going to meditate. I can do everything else, but I'm not doing that step. Mm-hmm. And I think she thought I would soften around that. And then at 9 months, I was ready to do my 12th step. Mm. No, I was ready to do my 9th step, which is the amends process, and making direct amends. And she's just like, I don't feel comfortable with you going out and doing these without having practiced the 11th step. And I didn't see what one had to do with the other. Mm. And she talked about that moment of pause before you go and make an amends to somebody, and bringing in, you know, something bigger than you, so that there's the feeling of the greater good when you go out to do this work, this healing work. So to appease her, I set an egg timer for a minute, and I started meditating. And at the end, I kind of rolled my eyes up to God, whatever that was, and said, thank you. Mm. And that was it. Like, I wasn't going to do any more than that. But what happened for me was there was a time somewhere in there, between there and a year, where I got really just stirred up about something. I can't remember what it was. I was frightened. I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. I'm sure it had something to do with my immediate past that had come back up. Mm. It was probably part of the amends process. But I ended up in a room with a bunch of people and having these feelings stirred up in me. And I was just like, I'm not going to be able to go back out. I disappeared into the bathroom. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to go out and reface them. And, you know, it was anxiety, I suppose. But I was so unfamiliar with anxiety, other than my postpartum period, because I hadn't experienced that before I had babies. I didn't know what to call it. But while I was in that bathroom, I prayed. And I asked that if you can help me with this, help me remove this for me so that I can go back out and be a part of whatever it was. I don't remember what the gathering was. I would be really grateful. And Arlena, it was lifted, like better than any pill I had taken or any drink I'd ever had. More instantaneous, more freeing, more relieving than anything else. And I just sat there and I looked in the mirror and I got tears in my eyes. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? What just happened? Oh. And I walked out there and I was good. I was good. And so that turned it around for me. And so, like I say, I don't have an image of what I'm praying to, but boy, I meditate every day. I bring in my higher power, which is sometimes I refer to as my higher self. Like I picture there's a part of me that is above this kind of base material life that I lead, that isn't controlled by my ego, that is really interested in the greater good, that is grace, that is dignity, that is generosity, that is love. And if I can tap into that, tether myself to that higher self, I can just picture things coming into me, flowing into me, and fortifying me, and making it not just okay, but making me well enough. Because the thing is that my drugs and alcohol were taken away, but I still had something to treat, and I need to treat it with something. Yeah. And I didn't have any idea that I could treat it with an intangible, like prayer and meditation. That just doesn't. If you had told me that, at any point during that first year or the first 9 months, I would have just, patted you on the head and like,
poor dear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Poor baby.
Bless your heart.
Yeah. So
that's really an interesting point. I've never heard anybody say it that way, to treat it with something intangible. Yeah. It's an experience. I mean, the experience, I felt it as you were saying it. It's an undeniable experience. Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
So, I know that we're kind of coming to the end of this, and there's a couple things I wanted to share with you.
Yes.
Regarding my recovery, which is so Scott and I dated for 6 years. He moved here from Utah. We went to meetings every day together. He, kind of got to know my kids. I kind of got to know his kids. And 6 years later, we decided our kids knew each other well enough and liked the other parent well enough to move in together.
Oh, that was important too, from your experience, huh?
Yes, really important, especially from my stepfather. Yeah. And then from where I was with my children, how connected I was to them, which is something that I really worked on in my recovery, was to not take my kids hostage.
Sure.
And to let them be who they are and still love them. I can still love them, but I can't use them as a shield. I can't take them hostage. And so that's something that I did. But so, yeah, Scott and I moved in together almost 5 years ago. Or 5 years ago. And we have this blended family. His daughter goes to college here in Los Angeles. Both my sons are here. My son's in college here. My other son's a chef here. And Scott sponsors probably 15 guys, and I sponsor 9 women.
That's a lot.
I'm in a meeting like every day. I have a sponsor, not the sponsor who took me through the steps that first year, but a sponsor who sponsored me since then. And she and I meet regularly. I am not a big book thumper. I reject that term, but I love the literature. Yeah. I just love it. I love every word, every syllable as it's written.
Me too.
I know where things are in the book, right? It's just, that is my magic. My magic are the meetings. It's when I'm taking someone through these steps. It's when Scott and I are having these conversations at the end of the day about our recovery. I live in a sober home, and alcoholism runs in my family. My father's father was an alcoholic. His brothers were alcoholic. My father was an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. And I am an alcoholic, but now recovery runs in my family too.
Yeah.
So there's that.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're doing so much, I got to tell you, there is nothing like working with another woman when you're sharing mm-hmm. something that saved you and you get to pass that along and they receive it. And the energy that passes between you, it's amazing. Like that's my favorite kind of high these days. Nine girls, that's a lot. They're not all early recovery, right? Like some of them are long. Yeah. Don't you find?
I couldn't do it if they were.
I know. Yeah, I'm right up there with you, but they're mostly like I can only do like maybe 3 that are early recovery. Like meet with bi-weekly. Do you have any?
Yes.
I have like a little speech I give my girl. Like if someone asks me to be their sponsor, I have like a little speech I give. Do you have how do you approach that when someone says, "Hey, will you be my sponsor?" Do you have like some rules or guidelines, or how do you approach that?
I usually just say, let's see if it's a good fit. Why don't you call me every day for 30 days? So by day 3, they're usually out. People don't call after that.
Yeah, they sort of self-select.
Yeah, exactly. So, so that's usually how that happens. It's not like a test, but I really want to make sure it's a good fit before we go forward, because my sponsorship style isn't for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's, there's a personality thing involved. I can't pretend like personalities don't matter. Yeah. They do to me. And we have a group, we call ourselves the Owls, the women I sponsor and we meet once a month. We have a big step study. Oh, nice. We celebrate things together. We celebrate everyone's birthday. It's really a community. Yeah. So whoever I sponsor, I'm inviting into that community. So I like to be mindful of that as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Okay. And so I do want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your podcast. What inspired your podcast?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for asking. I wrote an article for the Huffington Post.
Awesome, by the way.
About being the only Black person at the Brave Magic Retreat, which is Elizabeth Gilbert and Cheryl Strayed's writer's retreat.
Oh, I met her. I met Cheryl Strayed. I didn't realize that was her retreat.
Yeah. It's a combination of 2 of their book titles. Elizabeth Gilbert has a book called Big Magic, and Cheryl Strayed has a book called Brave. So Brave Magic is their retreat together. They're really good friends.
Brilliant.
So this was a 600-person retreat, and I arrived. I really enjoyed it, but I was stunned that I was the only Black person, including the people who work there. Like, there were no other Black people there. There were 6 other people of color, but none of them Black. Out of 600 people. How
do you account for that? Why do you think that happened?
Well, I think, one, the cost might have been a factor. It was in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So location might have been a factor. Apparently, Elizabeth Gilbert and Cheryl Strayed have very white fans, which I wasn't aware of. But their fan base seems to be white women. So that's what I've learned, because I had the same questions as you.
Like, where are they?
Where's everybody else?
Where's my people at?
Just 1 or 2.
Yeah.
I don't need a lot.
Yeah. Interesting.
So anyway, I wrote that piece, and they published it for the Huffington Post right afterward, and it went viral, and I started getting all these direct messages, hundreds of direct messages from people, almost none of them Black, everyone with a story of feeling othered. And so, like, there was an older white woman who was heavyset and wanted to take a yoga class, felt like head swiveled toward her when she walked in, so she walked out. There was a man in a wheelchair who wanted to date, but felt like all anybody ever saw was the chair.
Oh, man.
And there were just so many other different stories. There was a white woman in Germany who had married into an African family, and they wouldn't acknowledge her at all at the wedding. Right. And so the idea that there were all these...
if you're not going to acknowledge the bride. You know what I mean?
That's I know. Yeah.
The poor lady.
Well, I got the impression from her letter that they didn't know before they arrived, because he didn't say. I think he was hoping that they would be more broad-minded when they saw her. Surprise! But yeah, so okay. I wanted to do a podcast about presenting people who have felt othered, and which is, like I say in the trailer, that this podcast is for anyone who's ever felt alone in a room full of people, which is to say that this podcast is for everyone, because everyone has a story of feeling othered. And my example was one example that's easily ID'd, that people can see visually, that I'm the only Black person out of 600 white people, but there are so many other things that separate us when we're in a room that aren't visual. You know, like when I was first divorced, being the only divorced person in a room full of couples was really isolating. And, you know, growing up, I didn't have very much money. And, you know, being broke in a room full of affluent people can be very isolating.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, the list goes on and on. So I was really fortunate to catch the attention of Allison Marino, who has a podcast network called Lipstick and Vinyl. It's an all-female podcast network. And she and her partner, Christina Barcy, decided to take me on and produce the podcast. And so they very cool. It's a really great first experience.
Lipstick and Vinyl is a network of women podcasters?
It is, yeah.
Ooh, I'm going to have to join that one.
Yeah.
You must introduce me. I'm very nice.
Yeah. They're great. They're great. And they've taken a lot of care and attention with this one. They really seem to believe in it. Scott is my co-host.
That is so cool. What did you call him? You call him Hun?
I call him Hun, yes. I never call him Scott. I always call him Hun. I just call him Scott when I'm talking about him. But so Hun, my co-host, and it's really, I feel very, very fortunate that this is the project that they've decided to put this attention into, and they're doing an amazing job. And we launch a week from today on April 16th. The trailer's out now on all podcast platforms. So,
that's a brilliant move, by the way. Sorry to interrupt you. I didn't know that was a thing to do a trailer. That I thought that was brilliant. And I was listening to it when we first got on, and I was like, I can't pause it. But,
right. I know. I was like, I hear my voice talking.
I'm hearing you in stereo, but you're saying different things.
So it's brand new for me. Again, you know, I have so much abundance in my life. You know, just the fact that I'm alive and I'm sober and I get to enjoy my life and be a mom and be a partner, be a daughter. Both my parents are alive and I get to enjoy them. My mom and the boys and I are going to Africa this summer to see that sub-Saharan African place that I'm from.
Super cool.
Go visit that, you know, and I really do. I have all this abundance in my life that I would not have if I weren't not just abstinent. You know, it has little to do with putting the drink and drug down.
I know,
and all to do with my recovery and what that looks like.
No, you've really done the work and it shows. I mean, I just get the vibe, like you just have a very brilliant energy about you that I really appreciate, you know, and I'm not surprised that they, Allison and Christina singled you out. You know, you really do have such a good energy about you. And I'm really excited about your podcast. And I can't wait to, I'm going to publish this one. I'm bumping a few other people out of the way because I want to be part of your launch. This is so exciting. I just know it's going to be great. And I just want to thank you for your time today. I'm going to leave links to all of your resources on the ODAT chat website. I will definitely share the links with you too, so you can, you have a great following on social media and Instagram. So we'll leave links to all of that as well. But I just wish you, I know you got to turn you loose. You got to run to an event, but thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to following your podcasts.
Oh, thank you, girl. I really appreciate you. And you're going to have to be a guest on my podcast coming up when we do season.
I look forward to it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Have a lovely evening. Thank you so much, Laura.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
One last thing before you go, if you enjoyed the podcast today, please don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and leave a review. And if you'd like to make a donation to the podcast and help me keep the lights on, you can do so by visiting odatchat.com. There's a donation button or membership button on the right-hand side. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us.